I always think about the Sahaba and just wonder, do you think they would sit around the Prophet and be like, Ya Rasulullah, I'm depressed. I can't attain happiness. How do I attain happiness in this world? Well, if you know even the slightest info about the Sahaba, the Khulafa al-Rashideen, you would know that that was the exact opposite of the kind of people they were. Happiness wasn't one of their main goals anyways. It wasn't even a goal to begin with. Umar ibn Khattab once said that Allah answering his dua does not concern him because he knows Allah is going to do his part anyways, and this is because of his iman. But what does concern him is the dua in itself, as in being able to make the dua, having the ability to make the dua. And I think this statement from Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab really says a lot about the kind of people that the Sahaba were, especially the Khulafa al-Rashideen. Now, even though the Sahaba never made it a direct goal to attain happiness, they were still the happiest of people, and they were the best of generations. But why do I say it like it's a surprise? I mean, someone might just say, they're with the Prophet. If I was there in their place, I would be extremely happy. I want you to rethink that, because in today's video, we're going to discuss one of my favorite verses from Surah Yunus. And this surah is Makkiyah, meaning that it came before the Hijrah. And during this time, being Muslim meant that you would be kicked out of your house. You would be hated by society. You would be an anomaly. You would be mentally and physically abused. You would become tortured. And we've seen that with the first martyr of Islam. We've seen that with Sayyidina Bilal, how he was tortured for his monotheistic beliefs and saying Ahadun Ahad. And if I were to just summarize it, being Muslim meant you lost everything. Now let me ask you again, what is there not to be sad about? Despite this, I did mention they were the happiest of people, and they were the most content of people. So what's really going on in their minds? We all want to be happy, and we all have innate desires in our life, throughout stages of our life. And Allah describes this in Surah Ali Imran, where He says that these worldly desires like women, children, gold, silver, horses, land, they have been made appealing to us. Now, to add on to this, there is a common cycle, a very repetitive cycle, to do with attaining things in this dunya. And Allah describes this in Surah Al-Hadeeth, where He says that attaining things in this worldly life is like rain which causes plants to grow. And I want you to just put yourself in the perspective of the farmer. You're waiting months and you're waiting years for plants to grow. And then eventually, they do grow. But they what? They turn yellow, they turn grey, they start shrinking, and they eventually die. And now, I'm not talking about halal and haram. I personally get excited when I buy new clothes every year, or I'm buying something new, whatever it is, it's different for everyone. There's nothing wrong to be excited about these things. But that doesn't negate or cancel out the fact that this cycle Allah is describing applies to me, it applies to you, and everything worldly, both tangible and non-tangible. I want to make a very big note to the video, or a disclaimer. This video is not money does not buy happiness. It is so much more than that and so much more significant. And if you've made it this far into the video, then I really recommend you to continue, and inshallah you will not regret it. Now I want you to take two people as an example. The first person is someone who is constantly wasting his time. He's never disciplined. He always eats bad. He's always smoking. He's partying all the time. And the second person is someone who is disciplined. He trains. He focuses on his studies so he can be happy in the future. Now, if you thought I was describing the disciplined one as the good example in this case, well, I'm actually here to tell you that they are both not on the right path, and they are both missing something massive. Now, what's common between both of them is that they both want to attain happiness, and they're both doing it through different ways. Now, for such a big topic to so many people, interestingly enough, Allah doesn't talk about it extensively in the Quran. Actually, the word happiness in Arabic is sa'ada, but extreme happiness or joy is farah. And farah in the Quran can be found a little over 20 times. But only one out of the 20-something times talks about true happiness or how to attain happiness. And that is verse 58 from Surah Yunus. Now, if you compare something like taqwa to farah, taqwa is found everywhere in the Quran. يا أيها النبي اتق الله ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين ومن يتق الله يجعل له مخرجا لعلكم تتقون. It's found everywhere, and it's a way for Allah to say that this concept, taqwa, requires a lot of guidance and perspectives and examples for you to get the whole picture and for you to need to know everything which you need to know. But something like attaining happiness is only in this one verse. And this is a way for Allah to say that this verse is all you need to know about attaining happiness. The same way the concept of Ramadan and fasting is barely spread out throughout the Quran. Actually, the concept of Ramadan is really explained in just a few verses in Surah Al-Baqarah. Yet, fasting is something we all do and we all apply in our lives. And the same way we apply that, we should apply this verse in our lives as well. Now, whatever this strange, mysterious thing called happiness is, let's just call it X. Now, what does Allah say about X? He says, فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. And X here refers to true happiness. So this thing they're happy about, X, خَيْرٌ, it is better and greater than all they يَجْمَعُونَ, collect, all the things they accumulate. Now pay attention to the language Allah uses in this verse. هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. يَجْمَعُونَ, collect. Now we are all collectors. We collect things of high value, we collect money, not only tangible things, we collect followers, we collect compliments, social connections, anything which we have innately or in our fitrah or desires to go and get in this dunya is in this category. Halal or haram, all the things we get are things we're collecting. Now let's think here. When Allah says this, He's basically saying that this X, this true happiness, whatever that thing is, we don't know yet, but whatever X is better than all of the things we collect. As in, the true happiness we're looking for is not in the things we collect. And X is better than the things that we collect. Now, there's many things which we want to get in this dunya, and that's completely normal. And for that reason, sometimes verses like these might not, click with us. But from the adab with Allah, or from the manners and respect we have for Allah, we know and we don't doubt in what He says. So instead of saying how, ask what is the hikmah, what is the wisdom behind this, or seek an explanation. Now the problem is, X is so hard and mysterious to find sometimes, because in this life we get tested and we get hardships in many different and unexpected ways, and we start to feel like being happy feels forced, right? You don't tell yourself to be happy, you just feel it. Now, if you reflect on yourself and on society, the happiness you're trying to go to is actually you getting away from something. And that's normally something giving you stress and anxiety. You see the person who's always playing football and basketball, playing there to get away from problems at home. Even people who go to the masjid, maybe they're just staying there longer because they have problems with their wife at home, they have problems with their kids at home. And unfortunately, this is what people confuse for happiness. Relieving yourself from something and cooling down, which is very temporary, whether it's halal or haram, is not the same as gaining something which is making you truly happy, whatever that thing or feeling is. Now let's go back to Surah Yunus. The beginning of the surah until 57 and 58, where we talked about farah, the Prophet is in a back and forth between him and the disbelievers, where they're discussing, is the Quran really man-made or is it really from Allah? And why should we even believe in the afterlife? And this is right before the verse about farah. So what does Allah say in verse 57? He calls upon the people, Ya ayyuhan nas, Ya ayyuhan nas, as in people of Mecca. And in the bigger picture, He's talking to all of us, both Muslims and non-Muslims. And just like how these disbelievers had preconceived ideas and biases against the Quran, against Islam, because of the religions of their ancestors and so on, they have a negative idea about the Quran. And by Allah saying, Ya ayyuhan nas, He is essentially saying these preconceived ideas, these biases you have, leave them aside. Let's start from scratch, because now I will tell you what the Quran really is. Okay, khalas. Ya Allah, I got all of these ideas out of my head. Now tell us. Ya ayyuhan nas, قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين. Four things. موعظة, شفاء لما في الصدور, Huda wa Rahma. There are no coincidences in the Quran. Allah placed this verse right before the verse of Farah. And we're gonna find out exactly why by breaking down these four words I just said. Starting with Maw'idha. Now Maw'idha relates to counsel and warning. And the exact definition would be a speech, action, or gesture which relates to bringing your attention towards the consequences of your action. And that alone is Allah saying that we all need help. And Allah is giving us this maw'idha through His speech, which is the Quran. Then Allah says, وَشِفَاءٌ لِمَا فِي الصُّدُورِ, that it is healing for what lies in the chests. And that is the heart. Now listen to the word used here, shifa, and not dawa. Now dawa in Arabic is medicine. And Allah saying shifa is basically saying that it is the healing in itself. It is not a treatment, it is not a means to the healing. No, it is the healing itself. It's guaranteed. So Allah is saying that this thing which has come to us Muslims is shifa lima fi sudur. And in the next verse He says that X is better than what we collect. As in, the problem is in us. It is in our hearts. And it won't be fixed by collecting things on the outside. Now it sounds cliche, but Allah is quite literally saying that happiness is within ourselves, that we can find it right now within our hearts. Now I think the majority of people who complain about reading the Quran and not feeling anything, or having to read and listen and kind of feel like it's forced to enjoy it, it's because they do everything with the Quran except what it was really meant for. Allah in Surah Sad said, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, to contemplate the verses. That is the main, the ulama say that this verse explains the main use or main purpose of the Quran. Before trying to improve your recitation and beautifying your voice and doing these things, the essence of it is to contemplate the verses. Now in the beginning of this video, I brought up the sahaba, and I mentioned that they were the best of generations. Now with contemplation comes experience. And the Sahaba were quite literally living with the walking example of the Quran. And this allowed them to experience what was being said in the Quran. And they lived the events of the Quran. And they brought gatherings and circles of people just to study and contemplate it. And that's why they were the best of generations, because they were the closest to the Quran, closest to the walking example of the Quran. Now trying to be like the Sahaba, let alone the Prophet, is like approaching infinity. It's never gonna happen, and you're never gonna be their level. But it's all about progress in the end. Try to be like them and adding more things day by day by day. And in this case, the best thing you can do is to contemplate, since we're not with the Prophet. Learn about him, and learn about the Quran, and read tafsir, and try to understand and apply them to your life. And ask your sheikh and your parents questions. This is not equivalent to playing Surah Al-Baqarah in your house on the TV as background noise to get rid of the shaitan, or playing Surah Al-Kahf on your phone while you're sleeping or laughing and expecting to get the same deeds of someone who read Surah Al-Kahf. These are not the same. Now in a surah which we all know, Allah tells us what to do with the Quran, and that is وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And a common tafsir for haqq, besides it obviously meaning truth, is that it refers to the Quran. And tawasaw is to do with working with people. Tawasaw, recommend and advise to one another. So to really get the most out of the Quran, it needs to be with people. It needs to be with people who are on your level, people who are better than you, like in terms of information, your parents, the sheikhs in your masjid, and even the people below you, so you can advise them, since you are having more knowledge than them. So Allah is telling us what the Quran is. He's telling us that it is maw'idha, shifa' lima fi sudur, huda wa rahma. And in the Quran, He's telling us how to use the Quran. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. After maw'idha, after shifa' lima fi sudur, Allah says that it is also huda. And huda refers to guidance. And whenever this word is used, it implies that there is a destination we're headed to. And let me tell you, we are all travelers in this world. We are all travelers, and each little goal we have, or each massive goal we have in this dunya even, is a milestone. And milestones are not goals in themselves, but Allah guides us through all of them until we reach the final destination. وَإِلَيْهِ الْمَصِيرُ. Allah is the final destination, and now we made it to the fourth word, which is Rahmah. Now I don't want you to think of Rahmah as mercy. Imagine you're someone who doesn't speak Arabic, and someone tells you that Rahmah is mercy. They get the idea that, oh, you did this, but it's okay. I won't punish you for it. I'll be merciful. That's what comes to their mind when they think of mercy. But that's not the case. Rahmah actually relates to Ar-Rahim. And the Rahim in Arabic is the womb. And in the Hadith al-Qudsi, Allah says, أنا الرحمن وهي الرحم شققت لها اسما من اسمي. That Allah has given the Rahim, the womb, a name or one of the attributes of Allah, which is Ar-Rahmah, which relates to Allah's mightiest or best name right after Allah, and that is Ar-Rahman. Now think about the baby. The baby in the womb hasn't done anything bad. It hasn't done any sin for it to require forgiveness or for it to require mercy. And that's why Rahmah is actually closer to love and care. And we are all in the Rahim of Allah in that same way. This is something for you to think about every time you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Something to just think about. Something so beautiful, which we miss out on every single day. These little details. And what does Allah say in the surah we all know? Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. Why do you think Allah says allama al-Quran right after saying Ar-Rahman? It's one of His biggest signs of Rahmah in this world, that He has taught and given us the Quran. This Quran, which we recite 5 times at least a day, is us having a conversation with Allah. Think about it in Surah Al-Fatiha. Allah is talking and He says Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, so on, until you say Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. That's us talking to Allah. And that's why we say Ameen in the end, because it's a dua we made. Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. The Quran is a conversation we're having with Allah. It's how we interact with Him. And what better is there than that? In my opinion, freedom is the closest synonym to happiness. Or you can even say freedom in itself is happiness. And Allah and the religion of Islam loosens your chains of relying on anything else for happiness, both tangible and non-tangible in this world. Not just money, but health and social connections with people who suddenly backstabbed you. Otherwise, people like Ayub would be depressed because of their sickness. Or Sayyidina Muhammad would be depressed because of his children dying, his wives dying, not seeing his dad, his mom dying when he was still a child. These things, he let go of them in terms of relying on them to be happy. And in my opinion, that is true freedom. Being in the Rahim of the Rahman. Happiness is with Allah and everything He has given you through Him and no one else. So after hearing all of this from me, I want you to go back to the verses and let's read them again together and let the verses speak for themselves. يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين قل بفضل الله وبرحمته فبذلك فليفرحوا هو خير مما يجمعون.